Hi there, this is Brandon Checketts. I'm doing a video series on starting an automotive website from scratch. And this is one of our early videos talking about I think one of the most important things we could talk about is how to pick a niche, and how to pick a niche that's going to be sufficiently large for you to do a good business, but also sufficiently focused and narrow so that you have as easy as time possible talking to your customers and marketing toward your customers. So one of the things that we see a lot of as our customers come to us, we get a lot of people that think that one of the things that they've already decided on is just focusing on the automotive niche, as if that's a niche. And it's true, that's a step in the right direction, but the automotive category, as you'll quickly find out, is really huge. There's millions of parts, lots of different products that are sold there, and so really need to take a smaller niche than just the automotive segment of the industry. So the things I'm going to talk about in this video I think are applicable to all industries, but we'll be using some automotive examples and stuff because it's what we know, and that's what we're mostly in the middle of. So a lot of people come to us, and I see this a lot, is people think that the more products that I have to sell, the more I have on my website, the more things that Google will index, and the more people will find from me, and the more that I'll sell. And that may have been true in the past. We call it the field of dreams approach, where it's kind of, if you just build it, people will come and show up. But that doesn't really work nowadays, where there's lots of competitors, lots of other sites out there, and limited amount of attention. I'm going to talk first about some of the main reasons why you need to pick a niche, and why that sort of focus helps you really to narrow down and talk to your audience. And then we'll talk about some more practical things about how to choose those. And I think in our next video, we'll actually go through this process with a few products that I'm considering selling and look through how to do that. So in the example of automotive, I talked about, automotive is a niche, but it's also very large. So if you want to go take that narrower, if you think about how many car makes, models, parts there are across the world, like automotive is just like I said, millions of possible products. So you really want to try and focus that down to as small of subset as you can that's still reasonably large. So if you think about, I was just trying to pick a smaller niche of that, and if you think about, there's thousands of possible makes and models, and to pick one sort of small one out of there, I might say we're going to focus our prospective site on full-size vans. That's probably a 1% of the total automotive market right there. So we've eliminated 99% of all the possibilities. So that's a great way to go, is just figure out, like, how can you get really narrow really quickly? And then I would even see you can even get more narrow than that. So again, the one example that I'm kind of going to look at a little bit is doing like conversion kits for full-size vans. It's been a popular thing since the pandemic sort of happened. And so there's lots of products and stuff that are out there. So if you can think about how much more focused your messaging will be as you're talking just about like the products that you're talking about there, the product selection, the things that you might choose to have on your website are going to be much more focused. You've eliminated probably 99.9% of the automotive market to focus just on this fraction of a percent. But also your messaging, your photos that you're going to have on your website are going to be much more clear. Your messaging as you're talking to those customers are going to be much more clear. It's going to make everything about your site more focused. Now, you are not going to sell products for all kinds of other cars, but those are, your messaging for those wouldn't be very focused. Your conversion rates wouldn't be very good anyway on those. So the more you focus on that particular niche, you're going to have a lot better time in all these things. When you're thinking about this too, and considering multiple examples, I find that often it's useful to think about it from the perspective of a single person. Often that's myself or somebody close to you that you know. For example, my brother is restoring a Fox body Mustang, and he's considered doing a website that's just like for the parts that he might need to rebuild or to build up that car. So think about it from the perspective of maybe somebody you know, or somebody that you are close with, or at least somebody that you can sort of visually, mentally picture in your head who would be a consumer of that particular site. But you'll find that once you pick a niche and focus on it, that affects everything from, like I mentioned, the products you choose to have on your website, to the way that you price those products. It includes things like how your brand looks, like how your logo might look, the taglines you might use on there. It might includes even things like their colors that you might use on your website and your font choices. So all kind of those visual things that go into it. Also affects sort of the language that you use on your site and in your marketing materials and in your social media, that kind of stuff. Any kind of marketing you do might be affected by that particular niche that you choose, and help sort of convey your messaging to those potential customers. So it really goes into making everything easier. So you can imagine if you had a site that was just focused on all things automotive, it might have millions of products on it. But that also makes it that much harder when you come to things like how are you going to spend your ad budget? If you have 100,000 products on your website, now you've got millions of possible keywords you could be bidding on to try and do those things. Whereas if you focused on a very, very narrow niche, now maybe you've got dozens or hundreds of keywords that you can actually focus on and actually win at. So from the perspective of like all your product selection, from the perspective of how you're going to spend your marketing budget on ads, if that's the way you want to go, or if you're looking at doing a lot of organic work, the more focused you have, the fewer pages you have to optimize for SEO content and things like that. One aspect that goes a little bit underlooked sometimes is the sort of concept of the more pages you have on your site. If you have hundreds of thousands of pages on there, like Google doesn't necessarily index all of those for a small site that doesn't have a lot of traffic. So Google has something called a crawl budget that they use, and they sort of allocate so many resources to your size website, and that might be measured in terms of pages or time spent or bandwidth that they use. But when you have hundreds of thousands of products, like Google's going to hit the home page and it's going to go a layer or two deep, but they can't get to all your product pages when you've got that many things. So even your crawl budget for things that are SEO oriented marketing, the fewer pages you have, the more likely it is that Google's going to index those things, and other search engines are going to index those particular pages, and the more frequently they're going to index them for being updated when you produce new content. One of the reasons I really like to talk about this is because it's actually been the story of how Xcart's gone all along. So Xcart started out in 2002 as a sort of just a general purpose shopping cart, and I actually wanted to show a couple screenshots just to demonstrate this. So this is thanks to archive.org. I can go back in time and see how the Xcart website has looked over the years, and this is a screen capture from one of our first publishes in 2002 when it was brand new. You can see we're just like just a PHP shopping cart software. As we go through time, jump forward 9 years to 2011, we're still like a generic e-commerce shopping cart software. This is still an era where there wasn't there's a lot of different self-serve options out there. Jump forward to 2014, we're still being a sort of generic platform for e-commerce, even up and through 2019. This is, Shopify is starting to become a bigger competitor here. And we had a little bit of content on here about our automotive. I think we're missing the header on here. Archive.org is not showing our header, but we had some automotive options on here. Maybe that's over here. Once we get into the 2022 version, we start to talk about automotive e-commerce because we've had people there. We're still focused on the general e-commerce platform. But since 2022, 2023, we've put much more work into the automotive space. And now, you can see this is a fairly recent one from 2024, where all of our logos and everything, all the products and integrations and stuff we talk about here is fully featured on automotive, and it's just that much easier for us to win in that automotive e-commerce space because we're heavily focused on it, and the competitors, the big competitors like the Shopifys and stuff, are focused on general purpose e-commerce shopping carts. So they don't go deep into these particular industries. So we are able to stand out because we've picked a niche. Again, this is going back to that whole story of picking a niche helps you to focus on a particular set of customers that really helps you to hone in on your marketing and messaging. So because we've focused on this, we've been able to focus on what products and features we're building. We're able to focus our marketing message, as you can see on our website, and as you see as we're publishing things on channels like for marketing messages on LinkedIn and YouTube and that kind of stuff. It's all very focused on automotive, so that we can win there. So that's the reason I really like to dive into this topic of picking a niche, is because it's actually been super successful for us, and I know that that's how it works. Unless you've got huge marketing budgets, or you've got some major differentiator that makes you extremely unique, picking a niche will help you to be much more effective at things. So I hope that gives you a lot of the reasons about why you should select a niche. And there's lots of other resources about this, including books and other things that we can link to and provide some references to about why selecting a niche will help you to focus. I wanted to get into a little bit more of some of the hows about how to go about doing that and figuring out what options you have and what things might be effective for you. So one of the starting points we often talk about is like, what products do you have available to buy? For if you're a manufacturer, obviously you're manufacturing parts, and somebody's probably made this decision about what parts you're manufacturing, and so you've got some sort of, you're the only people on the planet that can produce this and manufacture it, and so you've got some ability to get those products that nobody else can get. You're producing them, and so you have that ability. In other places, you can talk about, a lot of people go through contact manufacturers directly to get agreements to sell their products. And so with those, sometimes there's some exclusivity or some limitations on what you can do there. So anything you can do to source your products that give you some sort of a way to get products that nobody else can get is an advantage for you. When you get into sort of going through a distributor and buying parts from a distributor, like those distributors are selling to hundreds and thousands of other companies. So the less unique your products are, the more you're going to have to compete with those people. So if you can pick a niche by selecting a manufacturer or being a manufacturer, that's probably the ideal one, is because then you can have more limited control and ability to sell that product. So another thing you need to consider when picking a niche is like how profitable you can be with things, and that drives a lot of decisions that you'll make. So if you're selling products that are higher priced or that have a higher profit margin, you have more opportunity to do a lot of marketing and creative content and put a lot of work into those particular products. Or you might choose a different sort of niche where it's more high volume, when you're selling lower dollar products or lower profit products, but trying to do it at a higher volume so that you make up enough room to make as much profit as you need to survive. So there's trade-offs there on different ways you can go. Another thing you should consider when picking a product is like, what sort of warehouse or logistics infrastructure do you need for these things? Again, if your automotive parts can be big or heavy and require special handling, so if you need to have a warehouse, that's obviously much more limiting in what products you can resell. If you're able to do drop shipping, again, you have the ability to do a lot of products. It doesn't require any resources on your part, but the trade-off is that everybody else in the world can basically get the same products as you can. So figure out how that fits into your needs as well. One of the most important things I think you should consider when picking a niche is something that you're passionate about or that you love doing, because you're going to spend quite a bit of time doing this. So find something that you like to do or enjoy doing. That goes a long ways, not necessarily from a financial return, but as far as like a return on your time and a return on your enjoyment, how to do that. So there may also be things about this, and one of the reasons I mentioned earlier, people often pick a niche that they have some personal experience with, because if you want to go do some marketing and you want to go out and like show a particular car, like you've got one in your driveway, it makes it a lot easier to go create video content about that, or create other sort of content or blog or any sort of marketing material about that if you own a particular car or something. So you should consider that when you're picking a niche. Also, think about the competitive landscape. What other competitors you have out there that you know about out there. Spend some time it's called a competitive study. We'll kind of go through that in a future video, I think, to figure out how competitive is the particular marketplace. If there's only one or two competitors out there and they're not then they're not doing things as nice as you'd like to do them, you have an opportunity there to perhaps do something better than them. So take a look at the competitive landscape and how you might fit into there. Another sort of important thing I would pay attention to is like, how are you going to attract customers? And then once you've attracted customers, how are you going to sell things to them? Not just the first time, but in subsequent times too. So there's often a desire to do some sort of a product that's consumable or that has to be replaced frequently. Something like a windshield wiper or something like that is something that you know the customer is going to have to buy every several months to replace. So there's not only once you win a customer, if you can do the customer support right and the follow-up right, you might win that customer for years in the future. You can think about that terms in terms of like recurring purchases like that. You can also think about it in terms of like cross-selling things or things that they might actually buy later in steps or stages. Customers, if you engage with the customer over time and do an effective job at that, you can make that initial purchase turn into several purchases, and that's much more gets you to a lot more money than trying to just do one purchase. Another important consideration when picking a niche, we're talking about focusing on something pretty small, but if that becomes successful, you can have some plans for how you're going to grow or pivot that in the future. So oftentimes we'll see that in terms of like, I'm going to focus on one particular make or model of vehicle, and if that becomes successful, we're going to expand to another make or model. Or you can think about expansion in terms of makes and models, or in terms of product selection, or in terms of like choices of products you can have on there, and all kinds of ways you can think. But you may have some of those things in mind when picking a niche. It's favorable to have one that has a sort of clear way that you've thought about to expand. One that is kind of obvious in retrospect but doesn't get appreciated very much is looking at like just larger trends for particular things. So if you're, again, using the automotive example in the industry, everybody knows that electric vehicles are currently a small portion of sales, of new car sales, but that's growing a little bit more and more every year. So it might be a small portion today, but that portion or the absolute number of vehicles being sold is growing every year. So if you get in and can become successful while it's small, as that segment of the industry grows, like you'll automatically kind of grow with it. Even if you just keep the same sort of market share in a growing market, you'll see growth. So that's a nice way to be, is on something that's a growing trend, and then also pay attention to things that are like declining trends. So things that are becoming more obsolete and shrinking over time is probably not a good place to go. It can be sometimes a good place to go if everybody else sort of scatters and you stay there for a long term. Maybe like in a classic example, that would be like DeLorean cars, right? DeLoreans were around for only I think one model year, but there's a couple people that bought up like all the inventory for it, and 20 years, 30 years, 40 years later, they're still selling that inventory. So it can be okay to get in on a declining market, but just make sure and know where your risk is there. When picking a niche, I also like to think a little bit about how you're going to do the marketing for that in the future. Because different marketing may work differently for different particular niches. So if you've got to focus on, maybe you're really good at creating landing pages and doing organic SEO, figure out if that's a thing that would work well in your niche. Or if you're in maybe a highly visual thing where social media and YouTube videos are a good thing. If you've got some skills along those lines, you might want to pick something that's in a niche that's going to be sort of highly visual. Same thing goes with like how you're attracting traffic, right? If part of what you're going to be doing is going out to races and doing videos there, that goes into the niche you might want to select. So another one you might want to consider, just sort of as a caution, would be any things that have any sort of regulation or compliance around them. Pay attention to what those might be, because those have some extra overhead on some things like that. So if you're doing things that are not legal in all the states, or even something as simple as that contain batteries and have to have extra shipping requirements when shipping batteries, like just be sure you know and are aware of those things. And then the last thing I'll talk about when picking a niche is think about how you want to sort of differentiate your brand. Again, this sort of goes back to the competitive analysis and how different competitors position themselves. But it's real common to pick when you're positioning things like how do you want to position in terms of price. You can be more sort of low cost, like the Walmart or the Amazon Basics type of thing. Let's try to be like a low price, but make it up through quantity. Or you can go much up towards the sort of high price or luxury side of things, and where there's usually more focus on brand, more focus on customer service and customer support and those kinds of things. You can differentiate yourselves in a bunch of other ways. We see customers that do things like being eco-friendly, being sort of healthy, being new or innovative is an easy one to pick. So those are all kinds of other ways you can help to differentiate yourself. Another one would be providing a super high level of customer service. I've seen a couple companies recently that do a great job that just take sort of a boring industry but do a very good job about being super high, good customer success as far as like returns policy, customer support, helping people with installation, that kind of thing. You can also differentiate sometimes based on geography. So if you are a physical store and people are coming to your store to get things installed, obviously you're bound by geography somewhat there, and you can focus in on a particular geography. That's a pretty easy way to go. And there's a lot of things you can do to help stand out if it's a small geographic area. Of course, you're limited by geography in some of those cases. So that's the trade-off, is it's much easier to get traffic locally, but you also have a limited geographic range and a smaller number of customers in that geography. Something we're seeing occasionally is people that focus on different languages. So we tend to use English a lot. This tends to be the primary language that we see, but you can do other languages. I think there's other languages in the U.S., in Europe. There's lots of different languages spoken. So you could focus your site, again, marketing materials, customer support, and everything on a particular language as well. So that's a lot of different ways you can start to differentiate your particular product from other competitors that are out there. And those are things that you might think about when comparing or selecting different options for your picking a niche. And then in the next video we'll go a little bit more into this, but you want to make sure your niche is small enough where you can focus on it in terms of clearly defining a very specific sort of customer or two, but also large enough is that's not like, so that there's more than like 10 in the world, right? You got to have a niche you're going to have a large enough supply of customers selling enough stuff, buying enough stuff from you at a profit margin where you're going to be able to stay in business and do well. So the next video after this one, we'll be going through some tools that we use to make those sort of determinations to figure out how one thing might be bigger than another, what revenue is available, how much traffic is available for certain things. So keep an eye out for our next video, and we'll talk more about sort of those specific tools and go through. I've got three possible niches in mind for the site that we're going to create. Three possible niches in mind, and we're just going to sort of walk through and do some of that measurement with those. So pay attention to our next video for that. Thank you.